So good to see everybody. And today we are on week number 2. Okay, so last session we covered 2 segments, and today we will cover another 2 segments. So without further ado, I will jump straight into the sessions. However, I just want to reiterate that while the content could be technical because it's based on science, mathematics, fossils and stuff like that, we'll try to keep it simple. Okay, all we need to use is really logic, common sense, and these two, right? Just good logic and common sense, all right? So you may not, even though you may not understand all the technical terms, but I will always end off with the implications of what I'm sharing, the implications of what the evidence is pointing to. So that is more important. And even if you feel you may be lost as we go through the details, at the end of each segment, I will do a summary. And in that summary, I will summarize the implications of all the evidences, all right? So that we can understand what it means to us, even though we may not understand all the technicalities behind it. Okay, so we will begin with segment 3, all right? So you help me with the slides, huh? Okay. So segment 3, we will consider the question, did God create man, or did we get here through a process of evolution? Okay, so we will consider these 2 possibilities. Okay, so first I will start by sharing the hypothesis of organic and macroevolution. Okay, so this is what it is. The theory behind it is that there was a Big Bang that happened 13.8 billion years ago. The Earth cooled down. Sorry, is the slides up? Is up? You can see. Okay, good. Because I don't see it here. Yeah. Okay, so the Earth cooled down and formed a rocky crust about 4.6 billion years ago. Great oceans formed as it rained on the rocks for millions of years. Swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. The first living cells emerged through organic evolution. So we call that organic evolution from the primordial soup. Okay, so all these, people who study all this, they understand what we're talking about. Primordial soup, okay, about 3.8 billion years ago. But these are all theory. There's nobody there to observe it. Okay, nobody observed it. It's theory. Oh, too much. Okay, sorry. All right, I'm blocking. Sorry. Thank you. Can see? Oh. Is it better? Okay, great. Okay, so the hypothesis is that all of the many forms of life on the earth today are descended through macroevolution, okay, from a common ancestor, okay, the first living cell that emerged from this primordial soup, okay, and this common ancestor is a primitive single unicellular organism. That means single cell. Okay, so if you look at the illustration below, you will see the whole process, right? From nothing, okay, then, on the earth, there was rain, and rain down on, the rocky crust, and then everything went into the primordial soup. From the primordial soup, life emerged, and then from that life that came onto land, they evolved into the different kinds of living beings, living creatures, and even humans today, all right? Okay, so the other possibility of what happened is what the Bible says. So this is the assertion of the Bible. Next slide. So in the Genesis account, okay, I'm not going to read the part which is in yellow. This is Genesis chapter 1, the account. I'm just going to share from the left-hand side on what the account says, all right, in contrast to evolution theory, organic evolution. So the Genesis account was written about 1,500 years BC, so it's a long time ago, and it makes certain claims. And the first claim is that God made all living things. That means as opposed to living things emerging by chance from the primordial soup. Okay? And of course, if God made all living things, God made them in their complete form. Okay, what we see today, you and I, we were made, okay, human, right, was made in its complete form. The animals were made in the complete form. And it was not a result of small incremental changes. Okay, and God made everything, every living thing according to their kinds, right? So you have dogs, you have cats, you have cattle, you have different kinds. You have fish, you have birds, okay? So there is no macroevolution or change of kinds, okay, which is the assertion of Darwinism, right? One type evolving into another type. So the Bible says, no, they were all created according to their own kinds. And God made male and female, okay, male and female, and God gave them the ability to reproduce. Okay, so all these things, when God made, it is by His design. He designed every living thing for a purpose. And this is opposed to evolution, which says that everything came through by chance in a random, purposeless process that ended up to be what it is today. Okay, so you can see that the assertions are very opposing, okay, which is good. Then when we consider the evidence and the facts, you can see where the evidence points to with greater clarity, all right? So this is what we're going to do today. So let's see where the evidence and the logic points to. Okay, next slide, we see that, we will have two parts, okay, for the first segment, or this is segment 3, okay. So part 1, we will consider, did the first living cell emerge from the primordial soup? Okay, we'll consider all the logic and the evidence. And the second part of it, we will consider, did man evolve from a unicellular organism through macroevolution to the final form of man today? Okay, so two parts. We'll jump into the first part first. Okay, so in the first part, we'll consider, did life emerge from the primordial soup? Okay, in 1952, there were two people, Miller and Urey, and they did a test in a lab. They tried to simulate conditions for life emerging from the primordial soup. Okay, so this test caused great excitement among the evolutionist community. Why? Because they succeeded to create amino acids, okay, which are building blocks of protein. However, unfortunately, the assumption of the gases that they used were wrong. Okay, for example, okay, they assumed hydrogen, but hydrogen is very light and it would have escaped into the atmosphere, so it couldn't have been there. So when the assumptions were corrected, the test actually failed. And it was also subject to oxidation and so forth. So when they refined the assumptions and they tried the test over and over again subsequently, all subsequent tests also failed. Okay, so they have tried this for a long time, right? It also failed. So in the conclusion, they failed to produce amino acids through a naturalistic process based on the assumptions of the gases and the chemicals that were available, okay, in the primordial soup. Okay, next we go on to talk about the probability, okay, analysis of, can a living cell emerge from the primordial soup? What is the probability? So really, in those days, when the theory came out, they didn't have the knowledge of chemistry, they didn't have the knowledge of the complexity of, what makes up, the proteins and the different things that makes up the cell. So obviously, they thought, okay, this is simple, it's possible. But today, after so many decades with more information from science, we have the knowledge to test the probability of life emerging from the primordial soup. Okay, so amino acids are building blocks for proteins, and proteins are the building blocks of the living cell. Okay, not just protein, right? As I will share later, there are another 3 other very important components apart from protein. But we'll start with the protein, okay? So, they found that the probability of making a protein from amino acids in the primordial soup is so low that it approximates 0. Okay? Why? Because if you look at the picture on the right, it is a very complex structure. There are hundreds of amino acids that must combine in a certain precise order, and it must be left-handed, right? They have left and they have right, okay, in order to make a protein. So if you study probability, you find that the greater number of sequences that must happen precisely, and also the greater number of possibilities for each sequence, when you calculate the probability of the first item getting right, and the second item, and the third item, what is the probability? This times this times this times this times this. So you find that the end result is approximates 0. Okay, it's very, very low. But that is just the making of proteins. In addition to protein, guess what? In order to have a living cell, you also need carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. And these are also very complex. In addition, carbohydrates are also very unstable, which means that in nature, even it forms, it can degenerate very quickly. So if you add these other 3 components, okay, in addition to the almost impossible probability of having protein from the primordial soup, really is even more complex. It really approximates 0, okay? So the probability from protein to a complex living cell also, it approximates 0. It's so low. And, okay, to make things easier, the scientists, they try, okay? Next slide, okay? They took a living cell which has all the ingredients of what it takes to be in a living cell, because it is a real living cell. What they did is they poked it with a micro needle, okay, so that in a test tube it comes out. So within the test tube enclosed area, all the components of this living cell exist. But guess what? Even when you have 100% of all the components of this living cell, the moment you break that membrane, it cannot come back to life again. So, you can't put Humpty Dumpty together again once it's broken, even if you have all the components. They seem to need something beyond the right ingredients to create life. So the conclusion seems to be that it is impossible to have a living cell emerge from the primordial soup, even under perfect, perfect conditions or perfect ingredients. And, opposite of that, in Psalm 139, verse 14, the Bible says, "Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it." So the psalmist, in the Bible, declares that we are actually very complex, and we are the workmanship of God. So that is the assertion, on the other side of the spectrum, which is, assuming a creator God, versus the assertion of a naturalistic process. Okay, next, we'll talk about how after 73 years from 1952 until today, scientists still do not know how life has evolved. Okay, it's been a long time. 1952 is when Miller and Urey did their tests. Surely a lot of progress has been made in the field of science, equipments, laboratories, understanding and knowledge and everything. But after 73 years of trying, scientists are still not able to explain how life emerged. And they're still not able to make life emerge from a lab. Okay? So scientists do not know how to build the simplest bacterium, ab initio. Ab initio means from scratch, from the beginning. The cell is more complex than a space shuttle. For example, just now we talked about lipids as one of the components. There are 40,000 lipids identified in the cell membrane alone. That's a lot, okay? So you can see how complex it is. Dr. James Tour, who is a very well-known synthetic organic chemist who studies this topic, he says there is no truth to life emerging from a primordial soup because he understands the chemical processes required to make that happen. So with all of cumulative human knowledge, resources, technologies, and perfect conditions today in a lab. Okay, perfect conditions. In the primordial soup, there were no perfect conditions. But today, with all of human intervention, with all the perfect conditions in a lab, a living cell still cannot be produced ab initio. So if we can't create it in a lab with the biggest brains and with the best equipments and the best conditions, how much more difficult it would have been to have happened naturally without human intervention in the primordial soup. You can imagine that these are the evidence, these are the facts. So perhaps it's telling us that creating life is God's domain. It is sacred. It is not within humans' domain to create life from nothing. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 13 says, God gives life to all things. Okay, so we have covered the probability, right? But in evolution, there's always time and chance. Okay, so we have covered chance, probability. Now let's talk about time. Okay, so the next slide we will consider, right? Evolutionists have used time as a hero of evolution theory. Okay, so a quote from George Wald, a professor of biology from Harvard University. He says, given so much time, the seemingly impossible becomes possible. The possible, probable, and the probable virtually certain. One had only to wait. Time itself and the random reactions able to occur within these eons of time performs the miracles. Okay, so when something seems so impossible, you say, okay, let's just give more time to it, billions of years, and then suddenly it becomes possible. So today we want to consider the notion, is time the hero of evolution theory? Can something that is impossible become possible when you give more time? Last Saturday, we did an exercise. We said, look, if you go to a room and I didn't give you the materials, can you produce, let's say, a rose? Everybody said, cannot. Then I said, what if I give you more time? I give you 10 years, 100 years. You said, no. With more time, it doesn't solve the problem that without materials to begin with, without matter to begin with, you cannot have everything else. So that, we already came to that conclusion. Okay? But today, we will still consider the effects of time. Okay? Let's think about it from a different angle. Now, the fact is that a miracle of life has happened. A very big miracle. The fact that you and I are here today is a big miracle. None of us should be here. There should be nothing, in a materialistic world, there should be nothing if everything is uncaused. But the fact that we are here shows that a miracle has happened. So as we consider how we got here, as we think about what are the options, the theories of how we got here, we can have two choices. One is we can attribute this miracle to time and chance, meaning that, okay, we give you a free gift, right? We say that all the matter and all the things you need is given to you, okay, even though we can't explain it. But how all these things, these chemicals or whatever produce life, we say, okay, it is through a process that is purposeless and random. Okay, time and chance. Okay, through a long time. Okay, or we can say that we all came here through God, who is all powerful and who is all intelligent. Okay, so we will consider today, based on the evidence of the complexity of the all living things, including humans and so forth, does it look more probable that we are all created by God, who is all powerful and all intelligent? Or we came through a product of time and chance, a random and purposeless process. Okay? So we will consider that today. But before that, I will share with you that scientists have now said that time is actually an enemy of chemical evolution. It is not the savior of chemical evolution. It's the enemy. Why? Because they realize that time, okay, given more time, okay, organic synthesis, there are problems when you give more time. Why? The chemicals needed for life, in order to hook up the DNA, they are thermodynamically unstable. For example, carbohydrates are very unstable. They are also subject to decomposition, caramelization, and oxidation. Okay, so even if you have it there, it can degenerate very fast. They can be destroyed very fast. So if we're creating or we have carbohydrates in a lab today, you must intervene in the lab to prevent all these issues of decomposition, caramelization, oxidation. But guess what? When you're in nature, in the primordial soup, it is not a lab. There is no controlled intervention by any scientists or lab technicians or whatever. So the likelihood is that if you had it, it will very quickly degenerate given more time. So instead of time being the savior, time seems to be the enemy of organic synthesis. Now in the lab, or even in nature, when you do synthesis, you run out of materials at some time, right? You combine different things to cause a synthesis to arrive at a certain outcome. Okay, let's say in nature, let's assume it's taken 40 years to get to a certain point. But at the next step, they run out of materials. So what it means is that you must start the whole process again to try again. But in nature does not keep a notebook. And it cannot remember the process taken over the last 40 years. So it does not know how to replicate that process and then add on to the next step. Okay? So there are big challenges for organic synthesis within nature itself. So the conclusion is that time is the enemy for organic synthesis, and it cannot be the hero of organic evolution. In fact, it is the enemy. Okay, so next we move on to part 2, right? So we have considered, could life emerge from the primordial soup? We say time and chance. The probability is almost zero, and time is an enemy. So it has got these two problems. So now we'll move on to part 2. Part 2 would be, well, let's assume that somehow life managed to emerge into the first unicellular organism. Okay, so now we have to consider, did man evolve from this unicellular organism through macroevolution? Can a single cell organism evolve to be the complex human beings that we are today, and also of all living things today? We want to consider that. Are we good so far? Yes, huh? Okay. So first I want to talk about the difference between microevolution and macroevolution. There is a difference. Next slide. Now, microevolution, there are mechanisms to adjust to the environment, okay? And these mechanisms to adjust to the environment is already built into the existing information of the DNA of the living thing, okay? Sometimes we call it adaptation or variation. And this is observable in the real world. For example, when Darwin went to the Galapagos, he observed the finches. The finches could have different beaks size, right? It could be fatter, it could be thinner. During a time of famine or lack of food, it could change in shape. Okay, so based on this observation, Darwin says that, you see, we have observed a microevolution, and if you assume that this changes to the beak, let's say over a few years, and every few years it keeps changing, small changes will end up with a big change. So that is his assumption, right? He projected observations of microevolution to conclude with macroevolution. So what is macroevolution? Macroevolution is the mechanism for one kind of animal to evolve into another, one kind of living thing to evolve into another kind of living thing. So this is the basis for the hypothesis of Darwin's tree of life and the theory of common ancestry. Okay, so with the assumption of macroevolution from the observation of microevolution, he assumes that, well, this unicellular will then evolve into different kinds of life, right? So it comes from the same root, same ancestry, but it branches out into different kinds of creatures, animals, which then branches out further, and so everything it looks like a tree. Okay, just imagine, a tree of life, we call it. But the problem is that it is not observable. Nobody has ever observed macroevolution. It is a process that happens over billions of years, and none of us live through billions of years. No one has observed it. So it is simply based on the assumption that numerous microevolutions over a long time results in macroevolution. There is no evidence for this assumption, and it needs to be substantiated. Okay, and this is what we're going to evaluate as well in in the subsequent slides. So in the picture, I have shown you that can an amoeba, for example, evolve into Usain Bolt? Can that dinosaur evolve into the chicken? Okay, we have to really consider that, all right? Okay, next slide. So now we will consider 5 types of evidence and logical arguments that works against macroevolution. Okay, I will cover these 5. Okay, first we'll talk about intelligent design. If everything that we see is intelligently designed, then it couldn't have been a product of time and chance, a random process. Okay? Number 2, irreducible complexity. If everything that we see today must appear in its final form, it could not have evolved to its final form, meaning that if there was a process of evolution, it would have failed, because the only way it could be alive and sustained is that it appears in its final form immediately. So irreducible complexity will again work against evolution. Number 3, we'll consider the reproduction system. Okay. Number 4, we'll consider survival, because there was a transition of creature from the sea to the land, and we will talk about this. What are the chances of survival? And number 5, we will talk about DNA, the DNA which is software, highly complex software. Okay. So first, let's talk about the process of evolution, what the evolution's views of the origin of life are. So according to George Gaylord Simpson, it says man is a result of a purposeless and natural process that did not have him in mind. Okay, so we need to understand this. Okay, this process of evolution didn't have the end outcome in mind. It didn't have you in mind. It was just a blind, natural process that somehow stumbled upon, okay, through evolution process, the end outcome. So it's not directed, it's not planned, okay, it's random. Okay. So we will test the above assumption versus what we can observe in man today. Could man have actually come through a purposeless and random process? Okay, so we will test that. Okay, so the 3.1, right? So first thing I want to talk about is every part of man appears to be intelligently designed for a specific end purpose. Okay, for example, within us we have got different organs. Our eyes are for a very specific purpose. Our ears are for a specific purpose. Our heart is for a specific purpose. Our lungs, our liver, our kidney, and all the other organs are all for specific purpose. They work very well for specific purposes. And in fact, it is so specific that even, you go to medical school, you go to a hospital, you have different specialists, different departments, there are different fields of studies, And it works so well that even through the process of degeneration in this fallen world, when something fails to work, it causes so much problem that you have to go and see a doctor to fix that. So the assumption is that everything works. So the question is, can nature have evolved through a blind, random, purposeless process to produce all these highly complex organs that appear to work very, very clearly for certain purposes? Or do they appear to have been designed for that purpose? Okay, we need to consider that. Okay, so because of this argument that everything seems so designed, there is an argument against it, right, from the evolutionists. They say, surely if we have come through a blind, purposeless process, surely we must be able to find some organs within our bodies that are purposeless, no use one that happens to be there. And this will prove that evolution is correct because it's purposeless. So we call this a vestige. Okay, parts of organs in our body that have no purpose through the evolutionary process, we call this a vestige. So they suggested that, well, the appendix have no use, so it's a vestige. The tailbone, or I don't know how you pronounce it, maybe Sally can help me. C-O-C-C-Y-X, coccyx, is it? Okay. The tailbone is a vestige. Why? Because they said there's no use for the tailbone, there's no use for your appendix, you can remove it, right? But subsequent studies have kind of revealed more insights. They found that the appendix is a secondary immune organ. There is a purpose for it. And you found that the tailbone, it is the insertion site for multiple muscles, ligaments, and tendons, and it serves or provides a weight-bearing support to a person in a seated position. So there is a purpose for it. So the conclusion appears to be, it is highly impossible for human organs to have evolved through a purposeless and random process. They appear to be designed by an intelligent God for a specific purpose which is so complex. And again, Psalm 139 verse 13 says, for God created my inmost being. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. There is an intricate process. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Let's do an exercise right now. In this exercise, we will see if a blind process, a purposeless process can produce the outcome that you want. What's the probability of that? So the scenario is this, right? Okay, you have to produce a report for your boss. Your unreasonable boss needs a report for an important board meeting. You have to prepare the report for him by 10 a.m. tomorrow, but he does not tell you what type of report he needs and for what purpose. Maybe you have one of those bosses who don't talk much, right? So he doesn't tell you, right? And he says it's so important, you will be terminated if you don't produce the report that he needs or the board needs. There's so many kinds of reports. Sales report, marketing report, financial report, operational report, so many reports, okay? What is the likelihood that you can randomly produce a purposeless report that will meet his needs, at least 9 out of 10 satisfaction rate? Okay, what do you think? Anyone confident? Randomly, you pull out some report, you touch up, you can produce what the board wants. Okay, anyone so confident through a random process? If everyone try one possible report, okay, and you all put it together, at least one of it can be right. What do you think? Right data, right purpose, right information for a decision making and everything, okay? Anyone believes that purposeless process can produce something that you need, that meets that needs? No? No? Anyone yes? Okay, anyone says no? Okay, most say no, all right? So I think we all understand it, right? For something as complex as a board meeting, you need a report, it could be anything, even you just pick anything at random, you probably will miss it because there's so much information that you require. How much more the complexity of the human organ, you need to be a specialist. Let's say you specialize in a certain area, cardiologist, you study the heart. There's so much more. You need to get your degree. You need to spend 5 years. Then you need to do your specialist and whatever. Right? I mean, so complex. All right. How much more that organ can work so well. Okay, for a specific purpose. We'll do another exercise right now, okay? I mean, we always take for granted that our face is our face, okay? But your face is highly designed. If you were to think of a face that has randomly evolved, what would it look like? I attempted it. I tried to sketch out a face that is randomly designed. Okay, so instead of the 2 eyes, you have 2 mouths up there. Instead of the mouth, you have the eyes below. You have a nose that's turned upside down. You have a ear that's on the head, and another nose that is on his right side, and you have some hair on the left side. Let's say it's random, right? You just jumble up all the different parts. Could this have happened in a process of evolution which is purposeless? Maybe, possible. What problems would this cause us? If you had a face like this, what problem? Okay, we want to think of the problem because then we will start to appreciate how well designed we are. Okay, so when you eat, which mouth will you put in the food? Left or right? It depends on whether you're right-handed. Or 2 spoon, okay. 2 spoon, very good. 2 spoon, okay. But if you have 2 mouths at the eyes, then it will take up more space, right? Because, then you have 2 passages for the food to go down. And then internally, it will probably fight with your nose and it will fight with your eyes. What if you have a nose that's upside down? What will happen? Okay, it's about raining now. What will happen when it rains? What happens when you carelessly drink your soup and you accidentally spill your soup? What will happen? It go into your nose, right? So it cannot be upside down, okay? What happens if your eye, you only have 1 eye and it's below there? Parallax error, right? You need 2 eyes. What happens if you have a nose, a ear that is on one side and on top? Then you can't hear on the left side because, if the sound is coming from your left side, you can't hear it. What if you only have hair on your left side? Okay, not so aesthetically beautiful, okay? So there are so many problems with this random face. I think you can appreciate that our face appears to be very well designed and for a functional purpose. And not only functional, even aesthetic, okay? Well, we have 2 eyes that is on top so that we can see far and there's no parallax error. We have 2 ears on each side, okay, so that we can hear surround sound. Okay, you can hear, okay, better. You have 1 nose pointed down so that when it rains, you don't have a problem. Okay, thundering now. You have 1 mouth below, near the esophagus. Okay, it's very efficient, right? You eat and it goes down. You have hair on top so that it keeps you warm. And aesthetically, okay, it's beautiful. You can comb your hair and whatever. You have eyelashes to protect your eyes from the light and the dust. And perhaps for the ladies, it's also aesthetically nice. You have eyebrows to convey your feelings, okay, and to protect your eyes from light and dust. And there are many aesthetic features, right? Your hair, your eyes, your eyelashes, your eyebrows, even your lips. Ladies, your mouth, not just for eating. You can put lipstick, looks so nice. Huh? So the conclusion is the human face appears highly designed for functional and aesthetic purposes. And if it is designed, then it points to God. It doesn't point to a random, purposeless process. Okay, how many of us prefer your face to be designed beautifully by God versus to come through a random process where everything gets jumbled up? Okay, how many of us prefer design? Okay, a lot of people design. Okay, who wants the random one up here? Who wants? Nobody. Okay. So we get the idea, right? Even, within us, we know that, we should be designed. We want to be designed. Okay. Next, let's talk about the concept of irreducible complexity. And this is Darwin's own failed prediction himself. He said, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Okay, he was very fair. Okay, he made this statement. And this is precisely what we want to consider right now. When we look at, be it our organs, our bodies, the human, or even in certain living, be it animals or living things, if you try to simplify it, okay, you reduce the complexity. You take out one component and it fails immediately. What it means is that all components must exist at the same time, which means it could not have come through evolution. Because evolution assumes, okay, you need 10 things, okay, maybe it took 1 billion years to get 2 of it, another billion years to get 3 of it. It's a very slow process. So that whatever living organism must be able to wait that long to be in its complete form. Okay. So the next slide. Okay, Mike Behe. Okay, he is a well-known professor who studies irreducible complexity. He coined the term irreducible complexity. The idea is that nothing works until everything works. So he studied the bacterial flagellum, the picture on the right. It is built like a machine with a propeller, a drive shaft, and a motor. It is made up of 40 different proteins. And through his studies, he finds that every part is needed to function. Okay, when you take out one part, it will fail already. It cannot function. So how could a machine of such superb design could have evolved gradually? The answer is it couldn't, because if it only had 39 parts, it would have died, because it needed all 40 parts to be what it is, to survive. And if it did not work, natural selection would have eliminated it. It had to be created complete and functioning from the start. So studies like this, and I'll have more examples, okay, of irreducible complexity, but studies like this show that Darwin's own failed prediction has actually been confirmed through irreducible complexity. And a quote from Michael Behe says, "Irreducible complexity is a problem for Darwinian evolution. Whenever we see these complex functional systems, we realize that they have to be designed." Okay, next, let's talk about an example of the human eye, which is a marvel of engineering. It's so complex and so well designed for the purpose. Darwin doubted that evolution could produce the eye. Complex eyes already existed in animals of Cambrian explosion. We'll talk about Cambrian explosion later. No evidence that complex eyes evolved. Cambrian explosion is where life emerged, okay, in a very short period of time, very suddenly. The eye is able to detect light down to a single photon, which is amazing. And light sensing cells face the rear, not the front, the rear. Evolutionists argue that it was an evolution error. That's why the light sensing cells face the rear instead of the front. But findings showed that it was the optimal design, as it connected to blood cells and epithelial cells at the back to be nourished. If it was in front, as evolutionists argue, the blood cells and epithelial cells would block the light and we won't be able to see. So even the location of where, okay, it is, okay, it's well thought through, well designed. Okay, so the light sensitive cells is placed at the back because it is nourished by the blood cells and epithelial cells rather than the front. So the conclusion is it could not have been formed by numerous successive small modifications. Next, let's do an exercise. I'll ask you a question. Did the heart come first or the blood vessels come first? Let's make a guess. Who says the heart came first without the blood vessels? Okay, some. Who says the blood vessels came without the heart? Okay, some say. Guess what? If you have the heart without the blood vessel, you still die. If you have the blood vessel without the heart, you still die. Why? Because you need everything in place in order for blood to circulate and for us to live. So no matter what, if it didn't come together at the same time, evolution couldn't have produced all living things, because we all would have died in the process. Even you had the heart, without the blood vessels, you would have, perished. So what do you think? This is just the heart. Huh? Can you imagine? I'm going to talk about the rest of the things we need to survive, not just the heart. Would you agree with the conclusion that both must come together at the same time in its final form in order for living things to survive? Yes? Who agrees? Okay. Okay, many agree, okay? Then for the rest, I don't know, you try lah. Huh? Take out the heart for a while, keep the blood vessels there, see what happens, all right? Okay, let's do another exercise. Now it's not just the heart. Your body has got many biological systems, okay? You have your muscular system, skeletal system, nervous system, endocrine system, circulatory system, lymphatic system, respiratory system, digestive system, urinary system, reproductive system. Which system came first? And in which possible sequence? Want to make a guess if you could list down which came first? Because Evolution, it takes time. You can't have everything at the same time, right? And no matter what you say, no matter what sequence you put, there's a problem because you seem to need all this at the same time to survive. Okay, imagine you don't have a digestive system, you have everything else. You can't eat, you can't digest food, sure die, right? You don't have a urinary system, or you can't pass motion. What will happen? You can eat, Okay, I don't know. I leave that to your imagination, all right? So, it seems like common sense tells us that we have to exist complete with all the complex systems functioning at the same time in order to survive. And again, this points to creation by God rather than evolution, the blind process that takes time, billions of years. Agree? Okay, we're using common sense and nothing complex here, okay? Okay, let's move one notch up. Now, I want to talk about the reproductive system. This is a very amazing argument, okay? I didn't read about this anywhere, but I read about it in the Bible because the Bible says, God made male and female, and God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. It's an act of design, according to the Bible. So now we want to test, could male and female and the reproductive system, the ability to produce offspring, could it have come through a natural, undirected process? The argument would be, argument is through logic, just logic. Evolution could not have produced a reproductive system. Many reasons. Number one, no reason to create competition through offsprings for food. Okay? Evolution is selfish, right? Why would you want to have offspring to compete with you for food, right? So, no reason to have produced it. No reason to have reproductive organs in a purposeless process because how would you know you need reproductive organs? Don't know, okay? No knowledge of what is needed to achieve reproduction. Who will know that you need an egg and a sperm coming together to produce life? Even if you knew you needed that, there's no knowledge to produce, how to produce an egg in a female, or the knowledge of how to produce a sperm in a male is so complex. But the problem is you didn't even know what you needed to start with to create a reproductive, that you need a reproductive system. Do you see that problem there? If you don't know what you need, how will you get it, right? We had the exercise that we did earlier, right? You don't know the report your boss wants. How would you produce that report? Okay, who would think of a reproductive system unless it's designed? And even granted, give chance, right? Even if all the above succeeded miraculously, you still have a problem of time mismatch. What if there was a female that could evolve to produce egg, but there was no male that evolved to produce a sperm? Still cannot reproduce, right? Or there's a location mismatch. What if the female that had the egg was in Africa, the male who had the egg was in Asia? Okay, how would they come together to produce offspring? So, you look at all these complexities and arguments, you find that it is impossible. The reproductive system could never have happened through a blind process. Okay, nobody can prove that it happened. Okay, it's so complex. So to me, the conclusion is that it is impossible for the reproductive system to have come through the process of evolution, and evolution fails. God made male and female as a perfectly designed complement with capability for reproduction. And reproduction is necessary for life to continue from one generation to another until it is what it is today. We are all here. Without reproduction, whatever has evolved, even you say it could evolve, they would have died within a generation. Okay? To understand the complexity of this problem, let's play a game of perfect fit. Okay. So the idea is this, right? A plus B is C, all right? Let's use numbers, okay? C is a number, okay? But you don't know what this number is. And because it's so complex, this number could be anything below 1 trillion, okay? It's a big number. Okay, maybe you can even have decimal places or so, okay? You don't know what this number is. Now you pair up in pairs of two people. Each of you think of one number randomly. And you add these two numbers together. what are the chances that the two numbers you add will be the number, okay, A plus B. Two person are A and B, right? You pick a number, I will determine what C is, okay, but you don't know. And this could be in trillions with decimal place, okay? What are the chances that your number add together will be my number? Okay, so this is trying to create something through a random process, when you don't know what the end outcome is. You want to try or no? Okay, my number very big one. I have a number. Try. Okay, try. Maybe let's try one, two of you. Okay, try. Tell me a number. You think of a number. Okay, take your phone. Add. Okay, you type one number, then you plus, then let him type another number, plus, you tell me what's that number, and then we'll compare with my number. It can be one digit also, you don't know. It can be trillion also, you don't know. It can be small also, don't know, okay. But to simulate the complexity of nature, I use a big number. That one I give you a hint. But nature wouldn't give you a hint. Okay, what's your number? 998,462.2. Okay, my number is 214 billion 35,263,689. Okay, miss by very far. Okay. So my point is, if you don't even know what is needed for the reproduction system, can evolution bring you there? Come on, let's use a bit of logic. Let's use a bit of common sense. Impossible. And this is just a number. Number is very easy. What makes up the egg and the sperm, and to cause life to exist through that process, it is far more complicated than just a number, even with billions of digits, far more complex, okay? Okay, so, cannot, right? So let's go to another exercise now, okay? Now we'll consider the possibility that a creature from the sea that has evolved alive, right? From the unicellular, maybe it became a fish or something like that. Okay, and then it comes up to land, because it has to come up to land in order for us to be here today. Okay. So what is the okay? When let's say this fish, okay, when it was in the ocean, does it have gills or lungs? Tell me. To survive, gills. When it comes out on land, what does it need to survive? Lungs. Now, evolution is a long process, right? Billions of years, hundreds of millions. The moment it came out from the sea to the land, if it didn't have lungs, what would happen? Die. Does it know it needs lungs in an evolutionary process? No. How could it have produced that which it doesn't know what it needs? And plus, it takes a long time to evolve. Okay? So, would you agree with me that this could never have happened? Life could never have emerged from the ocean onto land. Why? Because it would have died instantly, even if, granted, we assume that it existed in the ocean and now it's coming onto land. So, conclusion, I think it is impossible for animals to have emerged, from the sea to the land, from the primordial soup, because it didn't know it needed lungs and it couldn't have evolved it instantly. Okay, and Genesis 1:21 says, "So God created sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abound according to their kind, and God saw that it was good." Okay, so the Bible tells us God created animals in the sea, land creatures, birds of the air, and so forth. Okay? And in case you think that, maybe by chance this fish somehow evolved both lungs and gills. When it was in the water, it used his gills. When it came to land, it used his lungs. It had both organs at the same time. Okay, let's assume that with you. Let's consider what other problems you may have when this creature comes from sea to land. Survival is more than just breeding, right? Breeding is only one aspect of survival. What else does it need? Okay, next slide. Okay, it requires a lot more. For example, it requires new kind of teeth for eating new kinds of food on land, because the food on land is different from the food in the sea. It needs a new stomach to process the food, digest the food on the land versus in the sea. And perhaps it needs a different kind of skin, right? Because the skin you have in the sea when you're in the water is different from the skin that you need for the land, right? In the sea you may have scales, but you come onto the land, you may need hair. It's different, right? So there are so many things that must evolve instantly the moment it came out from sea to land in order for it to survive. So when you consider all these complexities on top of just the breathing mechanism, I think you agree with me that it is impossible for animals to have emerged on land from the primordial soup, because it couldn't have evolved instantly, right? New lungs, new teeth, new stomach, and other necessary organs through a purposeless and undirected process. Agree? Agree, okay. Agree. So far so good. It's just all common sense, right? Nothing, no rocket science and so forth, okay? Next, we'll talk about information. Now, macroevolution theory cannot account for information. Okay? Evolution theory is really about the physical, the physics, maybe the biology, the chemistry, but not information. Okay, so according to a quote from Stephen Meyer, he says, the information contained in an English sentence or computer software does not derive from the chemistry of the ink or the physics of magnetism, but from a source extrinsic to physics and chemistry altogether, extrinsic outside of it. Okay. Indeed, in both cases, the message transcends the properties of the medium. The information in DNA also transcends the properties of its material medium. Okay, what it's trying to say is that information cannot be accounted for by evolution, because information transcends the realm of evolution, which is, in the realm of the chemistry, biology, and so forth. So I give you an example, right? Look at the picture on the right. Assuming that physically you had a bottle of ink, you had a piece of paper or pieces of paper, and there was, a strong wind that, blew your ink over and it splashed onto this paper. What are the chances that you get Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet written out on this as a book? What are the chances? Anyone says it's possible? Nobody, right? So you see that the information contained in Romeo and Juliet must have come from a mind, okay, to have used the ink to produce the information. But the ink on its own without that mind can never have produced that information, that story, okay? Likewise, in evolution, sure, you can make a hypothesis on how physical things, can evolve, but there is information required, okay, within the DNA of all these living things that could not have been accounted for through the process of evolution. So you have a problem here. Evolution theory fails. You need something that transcends the physical realm. Information is not from the physical realm. It's from an intellect, from a mind, right? We've got people in comm science in this room. You understand what it is to write a complex software, and you know that it is not just through splashing ink or through random actions, okay? It is through a thought process, very logical process, right? Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, okay? So next point, I'm going to talk about the DNA, which is a complex computer program that is produced by an intelligent mind. Okay, Darwin's theory of evolution was before the understanding of DNA. It was in the 1800s. But in 1953, Watson and Crick described the double helical structure of the DNA, and he discovered information-bearing properties of the DNA and the RNA, and it carried genetic information with 4-character digital code. So according to Bill Gates, the DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. So the software guru himself, Bill Gates, said this is far more complex than, Windows or whatever, okay? So it functions like a software program, far more sophisticated. It contains instructions to build proteins and protein machines and assembly complex structures like the eyes and the legs and the heart. It is the most densely packed and elaborately detailed assembly of information known in the known universe. So the question is this: now that we understand that within the human is not just the physical, whatever thing that evolved, but there is so much information within us. You know, there's a software program within us that tells us if you cut yourself, how does it heal, how does it produce, you know, a baby growing up, how does it grow, how does it produce. There's information that will say that, okay, your eyes are blue because your mother's eyes are blue, or, you know, you take on certain traits from your parents or whatever. So much information there. And guess what? Evolution cannot account for this information because this information is highly complex and could have only come through a highly intelligent mind. Agree? Our com science friends agree? Okay, agree, okay. So where did the information for the first cell come from? Information can only come from an intelligent being. Information does not come through evolution. You can buy a laptop, but it will not work without the software. We all agree? Operating system, right? So it looks like the conclusion is that an intelligent mind, which is God, it points to God. It put the complex software codes in all living beings, okay, which contains infinite knowledge. The DNA is a signature of God in His creation, okay, and this is intelligent design by God. And this is in line with the assertion of Psalm 139:14. It says, "Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it." Now let's consider how much information is there in the human genome. Okay, next slide. The human genome comprises information contained in one set of human chromosomes, which themselves contain about 3 billion base pairs of DNA in 46 chromosomes. Okay, I know most of us wouldn't understand what this means. Okay, just know that it's a lot of information, all right? I also don't understand, don't worry. Lots of information. And the total length of DNA present in one adult human is 2 times 10 to the power of 13 meters, equivalent to nearly 70 trips from the earth to the sun and back. Just an adult human, there's so much. Imagine writing a software with so much codes, you know. Okay, how long does it take to produce so much information, so much codes, and not just anyhow write intelligently as well, right? Because all this information must tell you whatever it needs to do, right? Your cell to repair, to whatever, okay, to build your organs and so forth. So much intelligence behind this, so much software that you can make 70 trips from the earth to the sun and back. So the question is, what does it take to develop the intelligent and massive software codes in our DNA? What kind of domain knowledge do you need? Okay, a lot of domain knowledge, right? How to produce cell, whatever, heal itself, whatever. How many programmers you need within your team? Okay, before you have programmers, you probably need to do your architecture of your system and everything. So it's all about software design, right? You need a software development team. You need a structure. You go through a software development cycle in a natural and produce all this. How long will it take? Okay, that's how complex it is. So the people who are in the IT industry will understand how complex this is. If you've ever written software, programs, apps or whatever, this is highly complex. Just for one adult human, okay? So, and that's not all. Now let's talk about all living things on this earth that has information and different kinds of information, right? Because the information on how to produce a flower is different from the information on how to, have a human, or information on how to have a dog and so forth, right? Information is different. So let's add all the information you require in all the DNA of all the living creatures on this earth. Let's see how much intelligence is needed. Okay, let's consider that. So the genome size of Paris japonica, which is a flower, okay, is 50 times of a human. How come a flower more complex than human? Okay, somehow, okay, flower. The trumpet lily is 30 times more. And the massive genome information in all 8 million species of living organisms on the earth, okay, is massive because there are 8 million species, and every species, okay, would have different information. So the big question is, who has infinite knowledge, intelligence to create the infinite information of the genome? It can't be evolution. We already said it, right? Information can't come from evolution. Who has infinite power, right? Not just to have this knowledge to produce the software, but what about the hardware itself? Who has the power to create everything in a short time? And again, it's not evolution, okay? The conclusion is only an intelligent and powerful God can create information, DNA, okay, which is in the DNA, and all living things which must exist at the same time, right? It cannot have evolved. We have covered that in the first part, earlier part. This is a staggering conclusion, a logical conclusion. You know, it helps us think about Creator God and what He's like, how wise He is, how intelligent He is, and how powerful He is to create all of us. Okay. It also kind of points, if we are made in the image of God, well, that's why, you know, we have a certain level of intelligence in us. We can do all these things. We can do programming as well. We can do comm science, right? Because you're made in the image of God. Okay? You have a certain degree of the ability that God has put in us. That's why we do these things. We understand these things. Nehemiah chapter 9 verse 6 says, "You alone are the Lord. You made the heavens, the earth and all that is in it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to everything, and the multitudes of heaven worship you." Okay, next slide is a summary of the evidence that God created us. We did not come through a process of evolution. So if you missed out on all the details you couldn't follow, okay, now is what it means. All the information, what does it mean to us? This is a summary, okay? The first point is that life could not have emerged from the primordial soup. Why? Because the probability for protein and life is approximates 0. And life can't even happen using the perfect contents if everything was there. And scientists up to today still do not know how life evolved, and they still are unable to produce a living cell ab initio after 73 years. This is very conclusive. Number 2, time is not the hero of evolution theory. In fact, it's the enemy. Okay, why? Because of chemical degeneration reactions of thermodynamically unstable items like carbohydrates. Okay. Number 3, the purposeless processes of evolution cannot produce functional bodies and organs that we have today. Everything appears to be for a certain purpose. Every organ within you. Next, the idea of number 4, the idea of irreducible complexity. There exist complex organs which could not have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications. Okay, we talk about the heart and the blood vessels. Evolution fails in line with Darwin's failed prediction. Number 5, the reproductive system. It can only have come through design, because evolution wouldn't have known what is needed for a reproductive system. It wouldn't have known what is needed in male and female to come together to produce a life. Next, number 6, it is not possible for a sea living creature to emerge as a land living creature, because it would need a new, breathing apparatus, right? You need lungs instead of gills. You need new digestive system, new teeth, new skin, and everything else which couldn't have happened instantly, and evolution wouldn't even know what you need in the first place. Next point is that macroevolution could not have accounted for information, because information is from the realm of intelligence, of knowledge, and it is not in the physical realm. And on that, right, the DNA is a complex software that comes from a highly intelligent mind. Considering there's so much information needed in all 8 million species of life on this earth, there's so much information needed, and evolution cannot have accounted for it. Okay? So in conclusion, the evidence does not support evolution, and they seem to point to God. Okay, so I will end this segment 3 here, all right?